Hey y'all, this is Ben Miller here at Third Motion Studios. Welcome to Ouroboreality. We're going to be talking about consciousness, cosmology, and metaphysics, and trying to kind of support spirituality in the process, trying to go up to bat for some kind of concepts, uh, that need more support in the scientific realm, and at the same time, just kind of explore and have fun. So, I'm going to start off with time and entropy in the era of time. Basically, how it relates to our internal algorithm and how we like to think, and how if we don't kind of get rid of the linear causality in our way of thinking, then it may be a roadblock for us to understand just how anything that I'm going to talk about works. Because I kind of need us to see things from a kind of a vantage point where outside of time and space, we can look at reality as a whole, and we can look at time as kind of just another vector, and kind of think of like time as of reality as a whole loaf of multiverse, and we can look at it from all angles. And then that's kind of how you're gonna go about geometry and sacred geometry, especially, but also understanding the illusory nature of our experience with time is an important first step to really kind of get into anything. And then eventually we're going to get to quantum aliasing, which is the concept of taking infinity, which is like this. If you had a number line, if you were operating on a number line that had all kinds of numbers on it, pi, phi, golden ratio, square root of 2, everything irrational, you know, you had infinite resolution, you could zoom in as far as you want. If you had that kind of world where you had no barrier to how deep into the number line you get, if you know what I'm saying, you have infinite, smooth, continuous number line, then things are a lot different, and pretty much everything kind of adds up to zero together. And that's why you have this sort of platonic realm where you have ideas like circles based on pi that can't really exist in reality because they have infinite digits. And you have this kind of you have this number line going this way, but you have depth going into it infinitely. You could zoom into it, and that kind of creates depth in another dimension. So I think exploring the number line is like another important thing. So, and how that number line is this infinite realm that kind of adds to zero, and how we have to take a bit out of it. We had to kind of create chunks of it, chop it up, make it not be infinite in order for us to see it. It's kind of like the universe, in order to observe itself, needs to divide itself, take a piece of itself, and then look into itself. And that's what we're doing. That's us. And it's important to know how that works, I think. So, since we're basically downsampling, like you would change a WAV file to an MP3, basically, if the WAV file were infinite resolution, let's say, the MP3 is like what are we experience. The noise that we get is kind of like it's kind of like matter. It kind of reaches a certain threshold of noise crosses, gets large enough to exceed a Planck length or a Planck unit of space-time. Then it becomes a standing wave of matter, and becomes a particle or some kind of perturbation in the field. So, anyways, so I'm gonna be talking about this theory where our limiting cognitive barrier actually is the catalyst for the creation of space-time and reality and matter all at the same time, all at once, and how we're not within some kind of external world of divergent kind of world where it's like an infinite sea. It's like if you take the infinite and call it one, and then we are one over our own fraction of that, then the all being one kind of ties everything together. We're no longer we're no longer a piece of a of an infinitely diverging reality. We are actually the totality of we are the totality of the reality, assuming a position within itself that becomes like a fraction of it. And then really very complicated, and if you don't understand it, we'll really much get that. We'll get there. Um, However, uh, I think going back to the time thing, um, I would say that, um, you know, what distinguishes the future and the past. I think that the future in the past is just pattern recognition. You know what I mean? Like, what we can tell, we have a narrative that tells us that, like, an egg that's unbroken comes before a broken one. But, like, we don't, that's only based on our limitation of understanding that, that it must come about that way. Like, the dinosaurs evolving into chickens, and then, like, then laying eggs, and then you can't unbreak an egg. Well, you can't unbreak an egg very easily, but neither can you break an egg exactly the same way that you broke it the one time that you're referring to. So they're not like the same, you know? So the idea that similar situations are the same is really the problem. Like, we say that, like, static noise is more likely than, like, spontaneous, like, arrangement of, like, organized arrangement. But spontaneously organized arrangements happen all the time, where noise doesn't, like in the magnetic field, for example. Or, like, if you have spontaneously arranged, uh, like, situation that seems really rare, and you have, like, a static noise that seems really common, so they're both 1 over the total number. You know, they're both equally unique. They're both total, like, they're both unique. So, like, you calling one static arrangement of information similar to another the same is just actually a mistake. Like, you were wrong. You weren't correct. You thought they were the same, but they're not. And that's like pattern recognition. Like, if we think there's no pattern difference, there's no discernible meaning in the difference between two things, we consider them kind of like the same, but they're not. And I think a different kind of perspective of consciousness, perhaps one that's really so far removed from our comprehension, like something that kind of defies our own, even, like, it goes outside and beyond our what we can even fathom. Like, they could maybe see like a pattern, the same way with the double pendulum and the single pendulum, having the mistaken idea that, like, one is that the double pendulum is more chaotic. Like, if chaos is lack of order, the double pendulum should be lack of order compared to a single pendulum. The single pendulum traces out a very, predictable pattern. A double pendulum is very unpredictable and chaotic. It's like, well, which one has more order? The double pendulum has more order, I think, even though it's less predictable. So for every lack of order you have more order. I think the moral of the story is that they're all the same, and our cognitive biases account for all of the differences. So we talk about the micro state versus the macro state, and we do the same thing. In Pascal's triangle, which you can go look up a video online about, I think on Veritasium, there, Pascal's triangle shows you how, like, different numbers of paths lead to different points in a scheme of a triangle. Going down a triangle in steps gets more and more paths as you go down, and the paths towards the middle and the bottom are the ones where have the highest probabilities. But that, just because there's more probabilities on that square doesn't mean that the paths themselves are the same. It's like you're just basically rounding away. You're just basically getting rid of hidden variables as if they don't exist. At the point you're not saying, like, I could have this situation right here identical to another situation that I happen to have a warrant for my arrest, and if I step outside I get ambushed by the police. Or I could have a situation right now where I don't, and they would look the same. Doesn't mean that they're the same, right? Like, they're not. So, anyways, I think that's probably a good start for this. I don't want to, inundate you on the first video, but just getting a kind of a non-linear conception of time, I think is important for and for the rest of this channel. If I start talking about, concepts and you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. A lot of the reason might be just because you're like subconsciously your algorithm assumes like things causing things in a certain direction, which I think is unproductive. When in this topic, when metaphysics has all to do with higher dimensions and geometry and math and number theory, I think it's important to do away with misconceptions as much as possible when you're working. Like your first axioms need to be strong before you build on top of them. And we're going to get into some fun things. We're going to get into higher dimensions and golden ratios, spirals, information transfer between dimensions, like this sort of geometry of higher dimensions, golden ratios, compression, things of that nature. Thanks for joining. I will talk to you later. Peace out.